Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Chicago-based jazz drummer Charles Rumback. Over the course of our interview, he discussed his Kansas roots, moving to Lawrence, and eventually landing in his current home of the very jazz-fluent Chicago, Illinois. He talked about traveling around the United States and Japan, playing with different bands, some of the new albums that he's released in 2015, along with many other live gigs that are taking place lately. He also discussed his jazz heroes, what may be next, and much, much more. Please dig this interview, my friends.
Thanks for taking a little time out for me today. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem.
So I'm going to go ahead and dive in right now, and I know that you're always very busy there in Chicago. Give me an idea, kind of a snapshot of what's been going on lately.
Yeah, well, we just got back from, I'm from Kansas originally. When we came back from the holidays, we were down there, and I had a few days back here. I work, in addition to like playing, I work on the production side of things. I work at a club in Chicago called Constellation. And so I had a few days to catch up on some work there, and then I went, so this past weekend I went to Oakland and I had a gig out there with Angela James, and I just got back Sunday night and getting back into the groove now finally.
Very cool. Before I get into your Kansas roots here, I just got the new Downbeat in the mail yesterday and noticed that the Whirlpool album and your album in the new year got some really good ink. So give me kind of an idea of what has been going on with releases recently and what might be on the horizon for you.
Both of those albums came out on Ears and Eyes Records, which is a label that my friend Matthew Golombisky started several years ago. We had worked together a lot on lots of different things, and he moved away. He moved to Argentina probably about 5 years ago, something like that. We had worked together on some things, and then it was just, it didn't, he was living so far away that we didn't really get a chance to work too much together anymore. Although there was one project that we completed with his large orchestra called Tomorrow Music Orchestra, and this band that I was playing with a lot at the time, Via Tanya, and we did an album together. So anyway, between then and now, I had been working on several recordings and hadn't really found a home for them. And I was a little bit worried about, with these 3 different recordings, like putting them out on different labels and kind of just, it's hard enough to follow sometimes what a musician is doing when everything's in one place, let alone when they're all over the place. So I got in touch with Matthew and I asked him about maybe just, working with me on these 3 releases. And he was down to do it. So the first thing that we did together was this duo album that I did with the bassist John Tate, who plays on my new album. And then the second one was the Whirlpool album with Ron. And then the third one was my latest album, In the New Year. So yeah, so it's been a busy year of releases, but it's like it was kind of like a long time coming, because these are things that I had been working on for the last few years, and it's funny that they all kind of come out at once. Not at once, but, in a short amount of time.
Sure, absolutely. Well, that's probably a good problem to have then, I would think.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I'm just happy that that Matthew was willing to do it and work so hard on the releases. He's really worked hard on getting the music out there, which is awesome. It's really all I can ask for.
Absolutely. So speaking of Kansas, let's get back to your roots. Specifically, where in Kansas?
I'm from Hutchinson, Kansas.
Okay. So talk to me about growing up in Hutchinson. Like, what was it about your childhood that gave you this love of jazz?
Yeah, people ask me that all the time when they find out that I'm from Hutchinson. But, it's actually, I had a lot of people around that were influential to me at a really young age. I grew up, my dad always listened to a lot of music. He wasn't super into jazz, like he didn't have a lot of jazz records, but he appreciated it, and he listens to all kinds of music. I remember listening to Doc Watson and Los Lobos and Buckwheat Zydeco and just like really all kinds of stuff. He had a really eclectic, still does have very eclectic taste in music. And so I grew up loving music. But when I was probably like, I don't know, 12 or 13, I started kind of getting serious about music. I really like decided to play the drums and really wanted to do that. And I had just discovered Jimi Hendrix and was like really getting into that. And then right around that same time, I kind of, for the first time, heard Miles Davis and John Coltrane. And then it was just like from there, just, you know, reading all the liner notes and just going outward from there. But around that time, like I think when I was 14, I met Ralph Brown, who's a saxophonist there in Hutchinson, still lives there, and he plays a lot with this R&B band, King Midas and the Mufflers, but he plays with all different kinds of people, and he kind of took me under his wing and gave me my first real gigs, and I had a steady gig every Sunday night for I think like 2 or 3 years. We had a steady gig at the bar in Hutchinson that was called Finnegan's. So we'd play every Sunday from like 10 to 2, and it was really cool that my parents let me do it because I was only 14 when we started.
Yeah.
But that was like a huge foundation for me, like about like just taking it seriously and really getting experience playing with people who were older than me. You know, later on, even I think I didn't even appreciate it fully until later when I went to music school and, you know, began to realize that it was like a really unique experience that I had.
So why did you pick the drums?
I don't know. I just what I was drawn to, I guess, from like forever. I was always watching the drummer. I didn't even really think about anything else. Really, I kind of just was drawn to the drums.
So as a kid, did you always have dreams of growing up and playing music, or were there other dreams you had?
Well, I mean, you know, I think like all kids, I played sports, and you watch Michael Jordan or whatever, and you have dreams of that. But that you could see pretty quickly how realistic that is, you know. From pretty early on, yeah, I think music was what I wanted to do. It's funny, as you get older, like that means, you know, those things mean something different, but that's pretty much always been what I was into.
So your education after high school, did you go right into playing live and getting out in the world, or what was your higher education after high school life?
Yeah, after high school, I moved to Lawrence, and with the intention of going to the University of Kansas, but I was going to a community college in Kansas City, Johnson County Community College, and I met some friends there that I played. You know, we played a lot, and I was in the music program there, and intending to transfer to KU, but it never really happened. I ended up moving to Chicago instead. But yeah, I lived in Lawrence for 3 years and played with some people there and in Kansas City. And while studying, you know, I learned, I think that's where I really kind of got to understand music theory, you know, and, you know, like what to call certain things. And I learned about harmony. I studied with Kerry Strayer, composition lessons, and that really, he really helped me. He was an incredible musician and really, you know, a straight ahead guy, but he just gave me like an understanding of harmony. And even though I wasn't really, like, the music that I was making was kind of more, I guess, outside than what he did, he was just extremely helpful to me. And I remember even then, like, talking to musicians, and they were surprised that because of my taste, you know, like I was into like Pharoah Sanders and stuff at the time. And I remember my friends being like, "Wait, what? You're taking lessons with Gary?" And I was like, he just helped me. It was never weird at all. It was really great.
So you moved to Chicago in 2001. Talk to me a little bit about, you know, Chicago's still Midwest, but it's still kind of like a little New York. What was it kind of like to go from a smaller environment? I mean, even Lawrence is a pretty thriving kind of mini metropolis. What was it like to go to Chicago. How did that work for you?
It was tricky. I mean, it was hard, honestly. Like I went from, you know, being very close to my family to like moving to a place where I literally only had one friend that I knew, you know, who I had played with when I lived in Hutchinson. He lives here, Jason Steele. It was also the person that I met Ron Miles through. I met Ron playing on Jason's record in like 2006. So, I mean, it was awesome in a way that like I got to see a lot of music, and I got to, you know, a lot of these people whose music I was aware of. I got to see live and meet some of the people and eventually play with some of the people, but it was also challenging. I mean, I was a full-time student and trying to work and like pay the bills. It was, and, you know, and being married, like it was a lot on my plate. Yeah, I went to Roosevelt University and it was good. I mean, I studied composition there with Tom Garling. He was also very helpful, and I was able to, you know, meet a lot of great people that a lot of them I still work with now, and it was a challenge, but I'm glad that I did it, and I don't regret it.
Speaking of about having a lot on your plate, along with leading your own quartet, you're a member of Via Tenia, the Horses Ha, and the Colorists. Talk to me a little bit about your side ventures, how busy things are with these other bands.
Really, like my first experience of like really touring or going like, especially like out of the country or playing in other people's bands, and not really totally jazz stuff, you know, like Via Tanya is like, I don't know how you would, like what you would classify it as, but Tanya's you know, a songwriter, and she sings, and the lineup that I played with her like changed several times while I was playing with her, but it was great. I mean, I got to go to different places and play all kinds of shows that I would have never played with her and another band, L'Altra, that I was doing some touring with. There's another band, the Horses Ha, that I did a little bit of traveling with, and yeah. So I mean, through those groups, like, you know, I got to go play in Japan. I got to go play in Europe and Australia. So like, get to see some things and open my eyes a little bit to how big the world is, but also how small it is. I mean, as a musician, I think it's easy to see how small the world is. You meet people and you see people like on the other side of the planet that like, you know, it's weird when you run into somebody like on the other side of the world.
Absolutely. Well, and that's what I was going to ask you. What kind of wisdom and good jazz music stories did you accumulate on the road, especially in Japan? Because they worship musicians that come over there.
Yeah, Japan's awesome. I've done 3 tours there, and each one has been incredible. All 3 of them were with L'Altra. The first one was with Joe Costa from L'Altra, like his solo project, but the other 2 were with L'Altra. And the culture in general, like, really appreciates music on a deep level. And I mean, I think a lot of places have that, but like, for instance, it being a rock band and like a rock show, and the audience is like completely silent, just listening. Like that really struck me when I realized that it was like that.
Talk to me about who taught you the most about music. Who taught you the most about jazz?
Well, I mean, I'm always still learning, but I mean, Ralph Brown, you know, in my hometown was a huge influence and still is. Like, I mean, just when I was back over the holidays, I went to his house and, you know, we listened to music together. He's always showing me new music and turning me on to new things. I mean, I remember like when I was 14, I would go to his house and he would literally send me home with like 30 CDs, and I would listen to them all. Like in 3 days, I'd have them all like listened to and like go back for more. And so, I mean, listening for me has always been like my biggest way to just, I don't know, learn about music and just learn about artists. And so it's always just, for me, just like finding those artists that are like really inspirational, that I really relate to musically. So Ralph was a huge, huge person to me that like showed me, you know, what has now become some of my favorite music.
everybody's saying something with their music. There's something that you're obviously injecting into your sound. What would you say? Is there a message that you're trying to put out with the way that you play music? Is there some kind of vibe you're putting out? How would you classify that?
I think with my music, a big part of what I think like my specialty as a musician is being a collaborator, Like a lot of times I'm working as an accompanist in someone else's band, so I'm like helping them like make their music as strong as I can. Whatever that means, like whether that means like it means different things in different groups, musically. But for my own music, it's a different kind of a challenge because like I think I really didn't totally understand how to accompany things like from a non-drummer perspective until I started writing. And then suddenly when it's my own music, I would never write the drum parts, I'll write the other stuff and then like sit down at the drums and play, and it's like just apparent what would fit, I guess in a way I'm hearing it when I'm writing the other stuff. But it also taught me to like listen in a different way. Like I'm just aware of all the parts, so you naturally don't overplay your own music because you're aware of all those parts and you want them to come through.
Yeah.
So, as far as what the message is, that might be different from piece to piece or band to band, but I think in my music, like the people that I choose to play with me, it's because I love what they do, and I feel like they will understand the direction that my music has.
Yeah.
So some of those people, then it's like they're just as big of a part of the music, and what they do to it is just as big of a part of the music as what's on the page, is the composition, or even I would say a bigger part a lot of the time.
Interesting.
Everybody on both of my albums as a leader are musicians who I'm huge fans of, and I think all of them really bring something very special to the music. I can't imagine either record would be completely different if I had a sub. Like if I swapped somebody out, it would sound completely different.
Sure. So as far as influences in your life, who would you consider jazz heroes? Who did you look up to the most, not only on the drums but in jazz, that kind of inspired you?
When I was first getting started, like my first real musical obsession, I think, was Jimi Hendrix. I really was like a super fan of Jimi Hendrix. And so because of that, I liked Mitch Mitchell and I liked Buddy Miles a lot, and I still love those guys as drummers. I shortly after like getting into Jimi Hendrix really discovered like John Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders, and Miles Davis, and so their drummers, Elvin Jones and Tony Williams are like two of my really heroes,
Yeah.
Especially when I was first getting started, but still now, like Elvin Jones, like, man, almost everything I've ever heard him on, it's just perfect.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then there's been others, of course, all the drummers that everybody loves, Jack DeJohnette, like, when I first was getting started, my uncle took me to the Wichita Jazz Festival, and I heard Brian Blade play, and I talked to him, and he was really just like really awesome. He took time to talk to me. I was like 15-year-old kid, like, and he was super cool, like really inspired me in a big way. And that was kind of an amazing moment for me because I had heard a lot of like more modern jazz on CDs or whatever, but I hadn't seen it live. So to see Brian Blade play with Joshua Redman was like really a big deal for me.
Oh yeah.
It really opened some doors. I was like, oh, that, like just seeing him do some things, I was like, oh, that's how you play that. That's what like this is. And still, like Brian Blade, like we've crossed paths many times over the years, and he plays with Ron Miles and Ron's trio, and yeah, we've kind of become friends, and he's still like a huge inspiration and an amazing guy.
Let's whittle this list down a little bit. If you could go back in time and see any jazz musician play live, where would you go and who would you see?
Limited to jazz?
Well, no, you can do anything.
There's two drummers that I really am bummed that I never got to see live, and they're Paul Motion and Levon Helm.
Yeah.
My wife works at the Old Town School of Folk Music here, and I teach there now too. And Levon Helm did his last performance there, and I wasn't able to go, but I've always regretted missing that because he's a huge inspiration.
Yeah.
And Paul Motion also, I never saw him play, and he's like one of my all-time heroes.
Well, and of course, probably Jimi Hendrix.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember being in college at Roosevelt and hearing stories that Jimi Hendrix had played at the Auditorium Theater, which is the theater connected to the university. And I'm just like, I can't imagine seeing a show like that there. Like, I mean, I saw the Nutcracker there, like seeing Jimi Hendrix. I can't even imagine how insane that would be.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be totally awesome. Let me ask you this. What's the greatest thing about waking up every day?
Well, the greatest thing about waking up for me every day now is usually the thing that wakes me up, which is my son, Felix.
Nice.
He's pretty awesome. It's a really amazing way to wake up. He's helped me get my priorities in order.
Oh, they do that. They do that in a hurry. So why do you love jazz?
I think music in general, I love it for a lot of different reasons. Like, different music I love for different reasons, like, I don't know, it's hard to put into words, but I guess it's always been a driving force for me, or for everybody, for all musicians. But yeah, I mean, hearing other people's music is inspiring. Getting to work with musicians that I really love is like one of the things that actually makes me work hard. I've often said, like, I don't know how musicians, like, and not to generalize classical musicians, but like musicians that don't really play with other people. Like, I have some students who don't really play in bands or anything. They just work on their instrument and they practice and they come to the lesson, and that's their experience of music. And if I was like that, I would have just quit like so long ago, because what's interesting to me is like playing with these other people that I really love and respect. I feel really fortunate that I get to play with people that are like my favorite musicians.
Right on.
And I think probably most musicians that are working at a level, I think most musicians probably feel that way.
Yeah.
If they're working with people that they love working with. It's so inspiring. There's like nothing else that, I don't know, that comes close to it for me.
So let me ask you this. What's next for you? What in your career path, what are you looking for to have happen, say, in the next decade? What do you want to see happen?
Well, I was working a lot over the last several years, playing mostly in other people's groups, and I'm still going to keep doing that, but over this last year or two, I kind of decided to make an effort to work more on my own music as well. And so I would like to do that more, like focus on my own music. I think it makes me better on the other side. As an accompanist, it makes me better if I'm working on my own music also. So that's one goal of mine, is to work more on my own music and getting it a little bit more established that way, so that I am able to work that way.
I think it's a perfect way to kind of wrap everything up. Hey, Charles, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over America, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Charles for his music, his insights, and that jazz cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit the neonjazz.blogspot.com for all things Neon Jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.